So we're turning our piles here to which we've added wood chips and dried leaf matter to our 6-month-old composted bedding pack material and a little fresh scrapings from the barn alleyway. This particular turner does half the pile at a time, and you can see the speed at which you travel. It's an old turner they actually got for nothing, and it's working fine now. You need a relatively large tractor to run the machine though, because especially in Wisconsin, when the bedding pack material tends to run wetter, and then when it gets cold out, it can be a real challenge to get through the piles. I've actually run the Fendt tractor here, and I can tell you from experience that, running one of these turners, especially when the ground isn't perfectly level, you are constantly adjusting your 3-point hitch height and also the pitch of the machine itself and the height of the machines, the actual overall height of the machine as it's running, to compensate for what's happening with the ground. So as you're going downhill, then you're pitching the machine down, and if there's a dip, then you're lowering your 3-point hitch, because like I mentioned before, it's really important to work all the material, including the very bottom inches, up into the pile, so that you don't get a layer of anaerobic, meaning without oxygen, microbes growing on the very bottom of the pile, because those tend to be pathogenic and it's not good. So we're going to mix this material together, and then we're going to put it on our two 40-foot runs that we've got set up to the left there of perforated piping. And we're just doing a single pass just to sort of mix the wood chips and dried leaves in with the bedding pack material, as well as mixing that fresh manure to help heat the piles. I'm going to go ahead and switch to a different clip here and talk a bit about moisture content. So here we've turned the piles once, and we're going to transfer these piles with the skid steer onto our plenum of bark mulch or wood chips. And I wanted to talk a bit about moisture content, because it's really important to have that 60% moisture content. Too wet and it goes anaerobic, and too dry and the piles won't compost. So, if you look at this material, here I've squeezed it into a ball, and you can see there's a bit of a sheen on the surface, but one of the questions I had in researching this was, how do we know if our moisture content is right? Because when we're adding in wood chips into the pile, the wood chips can be quite dry. So, for example, if you use the method where they say you can, when you squeeze a ball of the material in your hand as hard as you can, you should only get a drop or so to come out, and that's indicative of a 60% moisture content, which is what you're shooting for. My question was, well, if we've got about a bunch of wood chips in there and the wood chips are dry and I get a dropout, yeah, it's 60% moisture for the material that's not wood chips, but the wood chips, if they're dry, they're going to absorb a bunch of that moisture, and so do we need to add more moisture in? And Another approach that you can take trying to figure out your moisture content is what they call bulk density, and that also relates to airspace, which is of course important so that the piles can breathe. And what they say is you need about a bulk density of somewhere between 550 and 950 pounds per cubic yard. So when you do the math on that, it comes out to 25 to 35 pounds per cubic foot. And we know that a 5-gallon bucket holds, roughly 0.7 cubic feet. So it turns out that a 5-gallon bucket should weigh about 14 to 24 pounds. So that's completely doable. You just need to make sure to, like it says here on the notes, to fill the bucket halfway, tap it down by hand, not really hard, but tap it down. Then at 2/3, tap it down again, and then when it's full, tap it one more time and top it off and weigh the bucket. And if it comes in between 14 and 24 pounds, your bulk density is right. Your moisture content should be in that 60% range. There's another way that you can measure free airspace if you're concerned about that, which depending on the materials that you're composting, here we're adding in wood chips, and we do have a fair amount of brown matter in the form of straw and corn stalks and so on that I felt like with the turning also that we had enough air. But if you're running heavier material or more dense material without airspace, you can check your airspace actually by filling a 5-gallon bucket with water, and then you weigh that, and then you fill another 5-gallon bucket with the material and take the difference and do some math as it describes there, and you can figure out what your free airspace should be, or what your free airspace actually is, and it should be somewhere between 35 to 60%. So, yeah, I just wanted to make mention of that.